I wasn't looking for Tartaria when I found the statue. It was October 14th, 2023. I was deep in a municipal archive in Philadelphia, flipping through scanned city council minutes from 1876, documents tied to the Centennial Exposition. My screen glowed pale blue in a dark room. Outside, rain hit the window in slow, steady taps. That's when I noticed something odd. A monument listed in an 1875 planning document as the Tartar Figure East Promenade had a different name in the finalized 1877 program. Same dimensions, same sculptor, same location, different identity. The official catalog called it Allegory of Commerce. Not similar, not revised, renamed. At first, I assumed clerical error, but then I found another, and another. Different cities, different decades, same pattern. Old statues, new names. And the original names quietly vanished. That's when the official explanation began to collapse. The official explanation is simple. Historical terminology evolves. Maps change. Words fall out of favor. Tartary was a broad medieval term used in Europe to describe vast regions of Central and Northern Asia. By the late 19th century, that terminology was considered outdated. Statues, exhibits, and monuments labeled Tartar or Tartarian were simply renamed to reflect modern geographic understanding. Reasonable. But the deeper I went, the more that neat explanation started to fray. On May 19, 1871, the New York Herald printed a description of a statue installed at Madison Square, an imposing 14-foot figure referred to as the Tartar Sentinel. The article described Eastern armor, a crescent crest, and boots fashioned in steppe tradition. Yet by 1883, city guides list what appears to be the same monument under a new title, the Guardian of Industry. No explanation, no record of replacement. Same base, same pedestal measurements, 12 feet by 12 feet granite block. Same sculptor credited, J.Q.A. Ward. Different name. Then I found an even stranger example. In the Illustrated London News, dated September 7, 1867, coverage of the Paris Exposition includes a photograph labeled Statue of the Tartar Prince, Russian Pavilion. I compared it to modern museum catalogs from the Musée d'Orsay. Today, the same sculpture is listed as allegorical figure representing the East. Not removed, reclassified. Here's where the pattern starts to emerge. In Boston, 1881, a granite statue in Dock Square was documented in the Boston Evening Transcript as Tartarian Navigator. By 1902 city inventories, it appears as Mariner. In St. Louis, during preparations for the 1904 World's Fair, a bronze equestrian figure, originally described in planning notes as Tartar Horseman, becomes Pioneer Rider in the final program. But it's not just one statue, it's dozens. Then I started noticing something even stranger. The term Tartary itself begins disappearing from educational materials at the same time. Pull up a map from 1771, the Encyclopedia Britannica first edition. Tartary stretches across northern Asia, massive, undefined, powerful. By 1911, the term is reduced to a historical footnote. The deeper I went, the more I found local monuments across Europe and North America originally referencing Tartars, Tartary, or Tartarian tribes, then later retitled with abstract names Commerce, Industry, Allegory, Progress. From Philadelphia to London, from Paris to Chicago. It wasn't one correction, it was systematic normalization. And that's when the official explanations began to collapse. I started examining the statues themselves, not the names, the stone. Look at the bronze monument in Philadelphia's Fairmount Park, erected in 1876. The figure stands approximately 15 feet high, holding a curved blade and wearing layered lamellar armor. The boots curve upward at the toe. The helmet bears a crescent-shaped crest. If you compare that to Central Asian depictions from the 16th century, there's a resemblance that's hard to ignore. But here's the official plaque today. Spirit of Trade. Trade? There's no ledger, no scales, no ships, just armor. Then I measured proportions. Many of these statues, particularly those created between 1850 and 1890, share similar dimensions, between 12 and 16 feet tall, elevated on pedestals exceeding 10 feet. Monumental. Dominant. In Chicago, I found photographs from 1893 World's Columbian Exposition showing a series of pavilion sculptures labeled Tartar Delegates. The images exist in the Library of Congress archive. Yet modern museum descriptions refer to them as generic Oriental figures. Generic. That word bothered me. Then I discovered something that changed everything. Several statues originally labeled with specific ethnic identities were later retitled using abstract virtues. Warrior becomes commerce. Prince becomes allegory. Tartar becomes East. The stone didn't change, only the narrative did. But that's not even the strangest part. Then I pulled up old maps. The 1706 map by Guillaume de Lille clearly labels vast territories as Grande Tartary. The 1744 map by Emmanuel Bowen does the same. Tartary is not a fringe term. It's mainstream geography. Fast forward to 1890. American school textbooks, specifically Mitchell's New General Atlas, still include Tartary in explanatory notes. By 1902 editions, the term is gone, replaced with Siberia and Central Asia. Now, that alone doesn't imply conspiracy. Language evolves, but the speed is remarkable. Within roughly one generation, Tartary transitions from continental designation to historical relic. I examined newspaper databases from 1850 to 1920. Search Tartar Prince in 1865. You'll find references to statues, exhibits, even stage productions. Search the same phrase in 1915, almost nothing. Instead, you get Mongolian, Russian, or simply Asiatic. Then I found city council records from Cincinnati, dated March 12, 1898. A motion was passed to update and standardize monument descriptions to reflect contemporary geographic accuracy. Standardize. That word appears again in a Boston Arts Commission memo from April 4, 1903. Reclassification of Eastern figures. Reclassification. No statue removal, no demolition, just language shifts. And once you start tracking those shifts, they're everywhere. Here's where it gets truly unexplainable. Contemporary accounts describe these figures differently than we do today. In 1874, art critic Henry Tuckerman wrote in The Galaxy magazine about the imposing Tartarian horseman whose stern gaze faces the harbor. Not allegory, not trade, Tartarian. In 1888, the San Francisco Chronicle reviewed a traveling exhibition that included a bronze Tartar warrior unmistakable in attire and expression. Unmistakable. But by 1912, similar sculptures are described as romanticized Eastern types. According to Samuel Williams, writing in 1780 about Asian geography, Tartary represented a vast empire known in ancient times for formidable cavalry and dominion. Empire. That word echoes. What was Tartary in the 18th century imagination? A people? A region? A political entity? Because here's what's striking. 19th century writers spoke of Tartary with specificity. By the early 20th century, references become vague, detached, almost embarrassed. It's as if the identity was slowly diluted, not erased in one stroke, just faded. And across archives, I kept encountering the same phenomenon. Early labels, direct. Later labels, abstract. That shift deserves attention. But here's what's truly remarkable. Count the years. Between 1870 and 1910, within the same 4 decades, 3 major patterns occur. The global elimination of Tartary from official maps, the renaming or reclassification of dozens of statues referencing Tartars, the consolidation of Central Asian territories under Russian imperial control, across continents, within the same generation. In Paris, 1867, exposition materials mention Tartar provinces. By the 1900 Exposition universelle, the term is absent. In London, the 1851 Great Exhibition Guide includes Tartary in global trade discussions. By 1911, the Encyclopedia Britannica lists it only as archaic. In the United States, between 1890 and 1915, census terminology for Asian immigrants shifts away from Tartar toward more specific national categories. It's not just statues, it's classification systems, language standardization, map redrawing, terminology consolidation, and the timing is synchronized. Count the fires, too. The Chicago Fire of 1871, the Boston Fire of 1872, San Francisco earthquake of 1906, archives destroyed, museum inventories lost. Coincidence? Possibly. But when you stack the timing, geography, and linguistic shifts side by side, the pattern becomes difficult to ignore. And that's when I started asking a dangerous question. What if these statues weren't being corrected? What if they were being reframed? Let me propose something that sounds absurd until you examine the evidence. What if Tartary wasn't merely a vague geographic label, but a real political cultural entity whose identity became inconvenient? What if the statues originally labeled Tartar weren't artistic fantasy, but cultural representations of a power that was later absorbed, divided, and renamed? Before 1800, maps widely use Tartary. Literature references Tartarian lands with scale and authority. During 1800 to 1900, Russian expansion across Siberia and Central Asia accelerates. Borders shift. Administrative systems replace regional identities. After 1900, Tartary becomes archaic. The term vanishes from textbooks. Statues lose their ethnic identifiers. This would explain why the terminology disappears so rapidly. It accounts for why monuments are retitled rather than removed. It clarifies why museum labels shift toward abstraction. If a vast, loosely defined cultural identity was fragmented and politically consolidated, renaming would follow naturally. Not a dramatic purge, just bureaucratic normalization. Some will say, Tartary was always a European catch-all term for lands they didn't understand. That's true, partially. But that doesn't account for the specificity in 18th and 19th century descriptions. Nor does it explain why sculptors repeatedly chose that identity in monumental art. Why depict something so vaguely defined with such concrete detail? The obvious objection is that we're projecting modern conspiracy onto routine linguistic evolution. Fair, but evolution usually leaves paper trails, debates, transitional terminology, academic discussions. Instead, we see abrupt simplification, reclassification, silence. What if these statues weren't hiding a lost super-civilization, as some online theories claim? What if they're evidence of something subtler, a geopolitical erasure through standardization. The evidence suggests not a hidden empire with advanced technology, but a forgotten identity streamlined out of existence. And that possibility is unsettling enough. So why isn't this common knowledge? What happened to the evidence? It's not active suppression, it's passive erasure. Museum records list items lost during routine transfers. Archive catalogs show documents unavailable due to condition. Exposition materials destroyed in warehouse fires. Not destroyed, just misplaced. Not censored, simply forgotten. I contacted 2 regional archives regarding early 19th century exhibition catalogs referencing Tartary. One responded that the documents were unprocessed. The other noted that early classification terms were superseded and not retained in modern indexing. Superseded, filed away and never examined again. Universities that once offered lectures on Tartarian geography folded those topics into broader Asian studies departments by the 1920s. Encyclopedias quietly removed entries between editions. Interesting, but not significant. That's the tone. The pattern of dismissal is consistent. Archaic terminology, construction exaggeration, romantic Orientalism. Reasonable explanations, individually, but collectively, the silence is deafening. What's not documented is the connection, the why, the how. And maybe that's intentional. I've shown you the visual evidence, statues renamed but unchanged. The documentary evidence, maps and textbooks shifting within decades. The testimonial evidence, period descriptions that feel more concrete than modern summaries. And the statistical patterns, global, synchronized linguistic disappearance. I can't prove this, not definitively. The evidence is circumstantial, fragmented, incomplete. But the questions remain. Why does Tartary vanish so abruptly from global maps? What explains the coordinated reclassification of monuments across continents? Who benefits from simplifying complex regional identities into generalized categories? Why do early descriptions feel more confident than modern retellings? And what else has been streamlined out of existence in the name of standardization? If you've noticed similar patterns in your own city, old plaques replaced, statues retitled, exhibits reframed, tell me. If you felt that something in the official timeline doesn't quite align, you're not alone. This investigation isn't about proving a hidden super-empire. It's about asking why identities disappear quietly. History isn't only rewritten in dramatic revolutions. Sometimes it's edited, softly, gradually, until no one remembers the original caption. Truth doesn't stay buried forever. It just waits for the right questions. This investigation is just beginning. Leave a comment with what you found. And if you want to follow where this leads next, don't forget to subscribe. We're not done asking questions, and this might be just what they let us see.